Okay, so there's a movie. If it's not Lightyear,
Incidentally, you're saying it's hard to get Jesus and Moses in the same thing in a world in which the number one movie is dinosaurs and people.
that is okay.
So,
that's a very good point.
thank you.
All of the poster action, once they've scraped you and me off the buses, has either been Lightyear or our next movie.
Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, which is the new film starring Emma Thompson, which is directed by Sophie Hyde, who made Animals, and written by Katie Brand. And it's basically a kind of rather stagey, but often very, very funny two-hander in which Emma Thompson plays Nancy, who is a retired religious studies teacher who has, we learn very early on, never had an orgasm and has spent her whole life married to the same man who's now deceased. And it turns out that their intimate life was spectacularly unintimate. And she now finds herself in a position in which she wants to know what all the fuss was about. So she hires a sex worker, a gigolo, played by Darryl McCormack, who is Leo, who she rents a hotel room and she gets him to come to the hotel room and she says, okay, this is the thing. Basically, I've got a list of stuff that I want to get through, a list of things that I want to get through, and that's what you're here for. Here's a clip.
You don't have to worry, Nancy. This is just about us tonight. So what is your fantasy?
I'm not sure you could really class it as a fantasy as such. It's a bit mundane for that.
Okay, well, what would you most desire? I mean, desires are never mundane.
To have sex tonight, with you. That's about it, really, for the moment.
Great.
I suspect that there was more to her list
Than that. There was.
that,
And then what
yes.
she says is that I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this if that's what they still call it, and then I want to do the other, but I don't want to do this thing. And so she has a very kind of school teacherly manner. She's literally got a list and she says, I want to get through this list. And he says, what, all today? And she says, well, you're quite expensive. So that's kind of...
It's like a running order.
It is precisely...
An order of service.
An order of service. And boom, there we go. And what she knows about sex workers is pretty much the fact that as an RE teacher, she would regularly set an essay which was, should sex work be legalised? And the answer was always the same because everyone would just Wikipedia it and then would just sort of copy and paste the Wikipedia answer. So what the film then becomes is it's a chaptered series of encounters between Nancy and Leo in this room in which she talks about her regrets about what she has and hasn't done with her life and worries about whether or not she's exploiting him because he's a sex worker. He keeps trying to say to her, well, firstly, we understand that he's playing a role because obviously what he does is role playing. And there are times when she oversteps the boundaries about respecting his privacy and kind of imagines this as being something more than that. But she also, because of who she is, cannot put aside her sort of her fussiness and her brusqueness in terms of, I want to do this, and this, and this is how we're going to do it. So on the plus side, it's a film which is, very sort of frank and very open about sexuality, and it has two very good performances. I mean, both Emma Thompson and Darryl McCormack are very good performers. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Emma Thompson, have been for ages and ages. I'm not somebody who's au fait with Peaky Blinders, but obviously everyone knows that Darryl McCormack is a very good performer. So, good performances. A script which is witty and often laugh out loud funny in its kind of the way in which it has that kind of... I mean, British sex comedies are not something to be proud of most of the time, but this is something which it's very, very well written. If I have a problem with it, it's that I never for one moment believed that I was actually watching those characters. What I believed I was watching was two very accomplished actors playing those characters. I mean, it's interesting because obviously the role of Leo, in order for him to do the job, he is playing a role. So he's an actor playing a role of somebody playing a role. But I always felt that I was watching actors playing a role, one of whom is playing a role and another of whom is also playing a role because they're adopting sort of, alternative identities for the purpose of anonymity, which then kind of falls away. If at times I was reminded of, do you remember that film Hope Springs with Tommy Lee Jones and Meryl Streep?
Yes.
Yeah. So I had a kind of similar kind of comedy about the awkwardness of dealing with sex at a certain point in your life when it's kind of fallen away and that there are, desires and things, but you don't have a language with which to discuss them, and you don't, you're sort of almost beyond the point when you could approach it without it being a difficult, awkward issue. And I actually thought Hope Springs was a pretty decent film. However, if you compare this, for example, with something like The Mother, which is Anne Reid and Daniel Craig, in a comparable situation, the whole tone of The Mother is very different. I mean, The Mother isn't a comic movie. The Mother is much more a kind of serious drama. In The Mother, I absolutely believed in Anne Reid and I absolutely believed in Daniel Craig all the way through. In this, what I thought I was watching was a stagey, I mean, it is stagey, it is theatrical. I can almost imagine it being performed as a stage play. Very well written, very witty, very well performed. Ultimately, however, performative film about these two people having a frank conversation about sexuality. It's good that it's progressive in its attitude towards sex, towards age, toward gender, all those things. I wish that I bought into it more. I wish that I had been swept away from it. I've read so many articles and heard so many interviews when people talking about why it's, fantastically positive, that this film is here now and talking about these subjects. And I think that's all fine. I just think that I wasn't quite as bowled over by it as I would like to have been. That said, it is, still subversive and enjoyably whimsical. The Stephen Rennick score kind of amplifies that whimsicality, and it's very easy to watch because it has two very good performers giving two very good performances.
And when you've seen it, if you'd like to take part in the conversation, correspondence@kermodeandmayo.com. Also the email,